to the cloud. All right, we are recording. Great, awesome. All right, guys, I am here with Shamis Pitts, who is the head of Pitts Leadership Consulting. She's a leadership consultant, and she does lots of leadership coaching, training, facilitation, keynote speaking, and human capital consulting. So I'll have to ask you about that. She has worked for over 20 years with management consulting, financial services, education, and startup tech industries. She was a C-level, so this isn't in her bio, but I remember her telling me this. She was C-level at the last few tech places that she was at. She is passionate about mentoring young Black women professionals and promoting well-being. And she launched a year-long Let's Live in the And campaign to create conversations around leadership and well-being. Love that. And is a Thrive Global contributor. She has an ICF certification as well as a bunch of other stuff, okay? An MBA from Cornell University and a BA from the University of Pennsylvania. So, and when she's at home, she does karaoke, goes out with friends, and golfs with her husband, Tom. Cool. Oh my gosh, my children are screaming in the background. Whoever's watching that's what's happening. Otherwise I have to put on the ugly.
Yeah, no worries. We're good.
Yeah. So for those of you I don't know, I'm Erin Newman, and I'm a money mindset coach and authentic courage coach for entrepreneurs who are ready to level up and make the income they really want to make in their business. And I'm so happy to have Shamis here for this conversation. We have already had such an amazing conversation the other day about social justice and things that are going on. And I'm just really excited to talk through what that looks like for you, what leading, learning, and healing looks like for you, with everything that's going on. And yeah, I'll just open it up and ask you to kind of, share what that means for you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Erin. I'm so grateful that we connected recently. So much is happening in the world, and as a leadership coach and a human, it's really important for me to be aware of how I feel as I'm navigating all of this work. The majority of the people that I work with coaching are people of color and women, talking through the things that hold us back, and I say us because I empathize with my clients because my clients are me, right? Like when I talk about who's my target client is me. And so I'm able to support them from my lived experience, and through all of my work experience, I bring all that to bear. And it's just really important for me to be centered in the work that I do. Recognize the feeling that's behind in order to be great at work, we also get to recognize how we feel about ourselves, the world, what's happening, because we're not, as much as we may try to compartmentalize, which I do sometimes, admittedly, to get through my day, our experiences, our lives are all interconnected in how we're experiencing things. So I appreciate having the opportunity to talk about this with you today. One of the things that I really want to speak to is what happened to me this morning. I'm in a leadership engagement with a client, an organization, and because I was so emotionally exhausted after my week last week, I don't want to say disconnected because I don't really believe I ever truly disconnect from anything, but I gave myself a lot of time for rest and renewal, which allows me, and I believe the greater us of the world, to be at our best. And so I didn't read a lot of news. I was aware of some things happening, but I didn't go and really dive in, and I like to be aware of what's happening. So I chose this morning to
read about Atlanta,
the killing in Atlanta, the Black transgender women that have been killed recently, the 2 suspicious deaths by hanging that are being investigated right now. in California of Black men. And I just was overwhelmed. And I was like, and going back, 2 weeks ago was my first session in this leadership engagement, and it was June 1st when I was in the conversation for the kicking off an engagement on June 1st, talking about what's happening in the world. And so I was overwhelmed. I was like, am I again going to kick off my conversation today with my clients, talking about the suffering of Black people? But how can I not, right? And I journaled. I went through my practices. I journaled. I talked with my husband. I listened to my theme song, my leadership theme songs about change and what it means to me and that I'm a leader in the world, thinking that was sufficient to get it all out. And yet still, at the beginning of the engagement today, I lost it. And because as much as I tried to get it out of my body, I do believe that I'm in this engagement with these employees and we're in it together. So I just, as much as I believe in getting things out in the open and bearing witness to my feelings and saying it out loud, I wasn't complete in that action until I said it to them. I know this is just a lot coming out. I'm still processing it. It was not that long ago that I got off the phone call, but I was like, wow, and I didn't get through all my slides because I realized the slides didn't matter. And it was more important to give people space to talk and connect and talk about things that are coming up for them in this context and in the context of their work. But recognizing, right, it's all interrelated. So with that, I'll...
Well, I think, I think what's happened so much in the corporate space is we've, pushed down all these feelings, pushed down across the board, but pushed down what's really going on for people and ask people to behave a certain way, to look a certain way, and it's all coming out. And we've got all of this, I'm not speaking for Black people, but just people in general. We've got all this stored in our bodies, like you said, that somatic way of processing through it. And when we haven't fully given voice to that yet, then it's gonna come out, and I think we're seeing that. And I know, because I hear this, this is what I hear from my white friends right now is I'm tired, this is heavy, I'm sad, and underneath that, I don't want to do this, right? It's underneath of that. And I hear that. And then, and then I look around and say, how can we not? Like this, how can we not,
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I think it's good to hear that people get to share what's authentic for them. I'd rather somebody tell me that it's a lot and I don't know if I want to do this because being in conversation about why do you not want to do this? Why not? Why is this heavy for you? Right. And giving them space to feel what they feel and being honest about that and authentic about that. And then just probing and questioning. Yeah.
So what was that like for you today in opening up that space? Because obviously you're there as a leader and you're also there coaching other leaders in how to lead their teams. What was that like for you? What do you think that was like for them as an audience?
Yeah, I mean, I still, it made me realize how, I'm human. I couldn't, as much as I tried to, I went through my steps to process it, it was still so much living in my body. I couldn't there would be no training if I didn't get it out. But I was also, and I thanked them for holding space for me, as we coaches like to say.
Yes, that's such a coaching thing to say.
It is. I thank them for just letting me be my authentic self. But I also recognized more so after the fact in my follow-up email that I sent to them that it may have been just too much, right? People, everybody has things that are occurring in their life, and it may have been given where people were, right? Because everybody's tired and exhausted and anxious, you know. But before, people were like that before COVID, during COVID, and after, right? With now the movement that's happening, it's a lot for people. We're experiencing this existential trauma of COVID layered on top for people who have been marginalized, on top of lifelong trauma. And then now we're putting this recent trauma on top that everybody's experiencing, but it's going to be amplified for different people in different ways, right? So I recognized, and I had to acknowledge to the team that it may have just been too much, right? And I own that. And for some people, they may have been neutral, and some people, it may have given them space to also feel their emotions. Right. And I don't know, but all I can do is acknowledge that everybody's in a different place, and that I just thank them for giving me the hearing and seeing me. Because I needed that to be able to move forward, but also recognize that people are in a lot of different places, and I just wanted to respect that, but it couldn't stay inside me.
I think that's such a beautiful example of leadership for them. You know, that is leadership. It's acknowledging where people are, you know, and being able to say, this is me as a human. Like you said, that opens up the space for them to claim that too, you know, and for them to be more authentic and real with their teams. And hey, this is what I'm going through, and this is what I'm experiencing. I always think that whatever happens in the training, whatever happens in the talk that you're giving, whatever, that's exactly what's supposed to come forth, you know. If you're tuning into what's real and true, then that's exactly what's supposed to come forth, you know, and that's exactly the message they needed to hear today. That's exactly the person they needed you to be today. And
I'm with that. I'm in agreement. And I also know that I can, to me, the word feedback is very neutral. So they have the opportunity to give me whatever feedback is in the assessment, because I also get to learn. Right. And so much of this journey is about learning, for me, how I'm going to show up for people. I believe in leading by example, and when I make a mistake, owning that, knowing I can't control how people feel, but I know how I show up, and I can be open and listen. And through those actions, I learn.
so what would you say to well-meaning white people right now about, you know, this? I don't want you to feel like you have to educate, but just what's a mindset, what's a stance, what's a, you know, way of being that we can try to embody right now, you know, and going forward, like how can we hold ourselves?
Yeah, well, for me, what I say is the same thing I tell myself, right? Learning is one of my core values, and I'm able to be a learner because it's rooted in my curiosity and being open and being present to the fact of things. I know what I know, I don't know what, and I don't know what I don't know. And so, you know, if I had to say something to white people, which I say to my friends, I have many very close white friends, best friends, that I went to high school with, have grown up with. I'm parts of all different types of communities. be open and be curious. If somebody, as with everything, if somebody chooses to share something with you, ask questions. If you're somebody that I know, I'm going to assume a level of positive intention. And what's been happening in some of the conversations that I've been having with my white friends is, I reinforce the fact that it's a space for authenticity, and any sharing gets to happen with respect and kindness. So when I gently push back on some things that come up, my friends know me well enough to know that it's only from a place of love and care that I'm sharing authentically, and when I challenge them. And my request of them is just to be open and hear me without defending what they do know, be opening to what they don't. But it also takes energy.
It does, because we're having to look at a lot of old stuff, our stuff.
Yeah, and if they're not ready to engage, that's okay. Like when I initially reached out to a bunch of my white friends, I created a group chat and I said, this is what I want to say, but I don't expect a response. Because I want it to, if people want to step forward in the conversation, they can, but I wasn't asking for them to show up in a particular way that worked for me, because there may be all other kind of stuff happening in their lives, or things happening in the background, conversations that are happening. I hope that they're happening. Sometimes they're with me, but they may be with other people too. And that's great. That's what should be happening, right? Just not being prescriptive about what I expect from them and how they show up. Does that make sense?
It does. I think I've been doing that. You will conform to what I'm saying. Tell us a little bit about your amazing background. I know we're kind of jumping around a little bit, but
I know, I'm like, that stuff. Yeah.
Because you have such a cool story. Like you've done, you could have gone a gazillion different pathways, right? But you chose coaching after a bunch of different things you did in your life. So kind of take us through that narrative a little bit.
Yeah, sure. So back in 2018, I had a realization that my life wasn't working for me. And that when I looked around at what wasn't working, the only answer I had was, I'm making choices that I need to explore. I can't look to anybody else and say that the action has to be theirs. I need to figure out what patterns that I'm doing. I've been working at the intersection of business strategy, process, and people leadership for 20 years. I'd started out in human resource management consulting, moved into financial services, and then went into education after I had gone to business school to study leadership and leadership development. And then after that, I moved into the startup tech space. So all of the things that I was doing were building and intertwined, weaving off of each other. I went back to school to learn how to really be a leader and figure out what that meant for me, and to move into organizations and amplify that. But I realized that I was, after dealing with some workaholism tendencies, unpacking a lot of issues that stemmed around the passing of my mother that I'd never processed for 20 some odd years, just really uncovering patterns, and then really figuring out, how do I operate from a place of wholeness and peace, which came from me being chronically stressed out, which is why I talk about well-being, because I'm challenged with it every day myself, and I didn't just, I rewound and played that again for you for emphasis. And I realized that I can impact somebody when I just walk down the street. and to engage with them. I was looking externally for things rather than really looking at me, Shamis, as being so powerful that if I really just hone into what I love and what my purpose work is, then I can just impact the world simply by impacting one person. And that's when I connected to coaching. And I say reconnect because I started a coaching program when I was running a charter school and told myself I was too busy to finish it. And I realized that all of the work that I've done and all of the work experience and all of my personal experience through my health challenges, my stroke, my TB, my mom passing, dealing with, navigating family challenges, all of that I could bring to bear into working with individuals one-on-one, but then really connecting then to the fact that I really enjoy the whole space of leadership development and deploying and using all the knowledge from practical experience and the learning and studying from school, bringing that together and really helping organizations move forward as well. So it's been an amazing journey. I hope that made sense. It's been an amazing journey because it just gave me such clarity. And I talked about that this morning on my client call. It's like, there's a reason why we're having this conversation now. There's a reason why I'm in conversation with you, with them, right? Like there's no other place that I could be right now at this moment. And I'm pulling from all of me to do this work, all of my experiences, all of my learning. And, I believe that talking about developing as leaders, and I believe that we all lead by example every day and we inspire and we influence in everything that we do. Now more than ever is the time for us to really move these conversations forward. But we all get to decide how we want to show up, and so I just, all that,
I want to underline all of that. If this was a post, I'd be putting it in bold. So I have two things I want to say and then two questions I want to ask you. One is, I just kind of want to emphasize for people because, I hear this a lot as you do in coaching, which is like, well, I was doing X and Y and Z, but that doesn't really fit now with this thing I'm doing and this thing I want to do and my dreams, but I was an accountant, whatever. And I feel like I'm always telling people like all of that adds up. All of that comes into play with whatever your next stage is in your journey. And, there'll be times in my business where I'm like, oh, that thing I learned 20 years ago, maybe it's, how to write a macro in Excel or something. And it'll come up again and I'll be like, oh, that's useful. I'm so glad I knew that. And it was one of those things that I thought, because there was this time in my business where I thought, oh, I could just kind of throw away all those years I spent in corporate because they haven't helped me in this, right? But they did.
Yeah.
And it's the same for everybody, all those pieces of your life and your life's work are adding up to who you're being, like you just said, just underline that. And also I think, those of us that are speakers, that are leaders, that are out there, what I find, months later after I've talked to somebody who saw me, speak months ago, right, is that they don't remember what you say. They never remember any of that. I'm sure I had some catchy title like 3 steps to blah, blah, whatever, I love those titles, but like nobody remembers that stuff, but they remember who you were being when you showed up there. So if we put a lot more energy into who we're being, and like you said, taking that rest and relaxation time for ourselves, like that's who they're going to remember. Those people this morning, they're not going to remember your exact words, but they're going to remember she showed up as her most authentic self, like truly most authentic self. And like, that was so freaking powerful. And I get to be that way too, and it just, it really opens up that opportunity for them too, to be that way. So the question I have for you is was there sort of like a burning bush, straw that broke the camel's back that finally was like, now is the moment, you're doing it now?
Yeah, the now moment it was the third startup that I'd been leading and we ran out of funding. But I always felt, and I was like, okay, I feel like I'm starting and stopping. And I just was unwilling to make any other, my next choice, I wanted to be a place that felt powerful. I realized that a lot of things that I had been doing, I was going with other people's flow. Shamis, oh, you'd be good at that. Come join me over here, right? And if I had enough boxes I could check about what I was doing, and I felt that I could have impact, I'd say, okay, I'll opt into that. But really, I hadn't figured out what was going to make my heart sing. And I knew I just was no longer willing to step into another thing without being absolutely clear on that, right? So once I had the clarity of the rest and the renewal piece and learning to practice mindfulness to help me deal with my stress, and then asking people, this is what I think I'm great at. What do you think I'm great at? And sitting and reflecting and exploring and being open and having conversations and really being open to feedback and learning about myself. How do people see me? This is how I see myself. And then stepping into getting some coaching and then having my aha moment, like, yeah, this is the thing. And once I started socializing it with people and they're like, yeah, why did it take you so long? You know? So it was just really giving myself space to reflect, which I'd been so busy doing. I hadn't really just gotten quiet and to really ask myself those questions. And I think if I can segue, like, that's some things that people can really do now. Getting quiet versus being silent. Right? So like getting quiet, meaning, you know, given where the world is right now, if I want to be about social change, what does that look like for me? Why is it important to me? Why is it important for my children? What world do I want them to live in? And okay, once I have that vision for what that world looks like, well, how can we actually get there? What do I need to do to move them in that direction? And if I want to move my children in that direction, what do I need to do first to move myself in that direction? All right, or move conversations forward with people that I care about, starting there before I start having conversations with other people, right? Or just being in that space of inquiry, which I know as a coach you're very familiar with, but quiet, distinct from silence.
I love that. I love that distinction. Love it, love it, love it. I want to broadcast that everywhere. Yeah, I feel like, and you know, in the first few days when everything was happening, I had these thoughts in my head of like, well, who am I to speak up? I just have this little platform. I just have this little group. I just have this little, whatever. It's not hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers, right? Like, so who am I to say something? Are people even gonna care, right? Like, yeah. You know, and I don't know if that's what's holding back people, white people, from even saying anything, you know, like a sort of that amplified version of who even cares kind of thought process. I think there's a piece of that. And then I also hear them say, well, I don't know what to say. You know, I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm just not saying anything. Yeah, and then I think then there's just that thing we spoke about in the beginning, that tiredness, that like, I just want things to go back to normal, right? There's that, I hear that, you know.
And what normal are they trying to get back to?
Right.
That would be, and that's a question, right? Well, what normal are you willing to go back to then?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it's more so, I think, just exploring some of these feelings, right? Not having judgment around them, but just being like, okay, well, what does that mean to you? Going back to normal. What would that world look like?
I love that. I don't know why I didn't even think, you know what I think I need to bring to this is the same sort of curiosity I would bring if we were exploring any other topic in a coaching conversation, right? Like I can be super, you know, and I am non-judgmental of whatever path you want to follow, you know, we can be really curious about it. And I've lost my curiosity in this conversation, you know, just like so much emotion instead of.
Well, I'm going to give you a high five for that. acknowledging that is an important first place, though, first start.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, yeah, I've lost curiosity. And that's like you were kind of alluding to, was that's not going to shift people, you know, when you bring that in, that energy in, that's not going to shift them. It's got to be from that place of like, okay, let's unpack this. Just like coaching, let's explore this, you know, let's figure this out together.
Yeah, you have tools.
I forgot them.
Right, you have tools and access that other people may not have, or in this moment, or they may not have, period, right?
Mm-hmm.
And recognizing that you can support them in just being curious and open and exploring.
I love that.
I'm not trying to go back to normal.
Yeah, and sharing too from, you know, from my story, like, here's what happened to me the first time I heard these words, the first time I heard this concept, the first time I heard that concept. Like, I hear you.
Yeah, I mean, was there, I mean, just, you know, was there a time when you witnessed something and you didn't speak up? How did that make you feel? Right, and sharing when you may have stood by and not spoken up.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and so, and yeah, I'm not saying go tell that to Black people. I'm saying, you know, conversations that you may be able to have with people that you trust, right? I think the best place to start is closest to home.
Right. Yep. Yes.
Right? Because at the end of the day, you know, these ideas around are so much of what we're talking about is rooted in trust.
Mm-hmm.
And basic trust is learned at a young age when attitudes, beliefs are imprinted upon you by others. And that is the foundation at which you're then evaluating other experiences. Right? And so to the extent that you can peel back that onion and look closest to home with your family or your 1 degree or 2 degree, right? Start where you feel safest. And that, depending on from whence you came, that may be a more challenging conversation than somebody that's in your friend circle, right?
Mm-hmm.
But start in a place where you feel safe, where you're not worried about psychological safety.
I love that. That's,
Okay.
oh my God. I wish everyone was hearing this.
They can when you broadcast it. So
You're
yeah.
right. We got to put it on all the places.
Yeah.
Is there anything you want to leave us with? Make sure we know, make sure we're thinking through, heading towards, you know.
I just, you know, the title of your series is Authentic Courage, right? And to move through this together, it's going to take authentic courage, people speaking up, speaking out in a way that feels authentic for them, right? Some people like to write, some people like to talk, some people like to talk to big groups, some people just want to be one-on-one. Again, like, just doing this in a way that feels authentic, focusing on being quiet, not being silent, recognizing that you don't know what you don't know, being open, being kind and respectful when you push back on people. Because if you want the dialogue to continue, people want to know that they can come forward and speak up, right? If they get, and just whatever you can do to make that context open and supportive, and asking those questions and pushing back gently, but firmly, right? I mean, when I first reached out to my white friends, again, who I've been friends with for 30 years, people who are some of my best friends who were at my wedding, who are constant parts of my life, my husband said, that text that you're sending them is very formal. I was like, okay, good. I'm okay with that. So it's clear how I feel. And so I guess that, yeah, that's what's coming up for me. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. You know, I think about other movements around Sandy Hook and Parkview, and I'm like, I know people are still out there fighting, but it's all very much in the background. And I wonder if people can really continue to commit the energy to move forward, because as we see, there still needs to be action. Things are still happening and they will continue to happen. And so what are we all committed to doing? And that's going to look different for everybody. But that's what I ask my friends. What are you committed to? I know I still have a lot to learn myself, my own history. I have my lived experience, but I don't know enough from where I'm sitting. Enough means I have an opportunity to learn a lot more so I can speak from an informed place about the historical context. So I got lots of reading to do, right? We all have opportunities to learn. So keep learning. And the healing will come eventually, but I guess I know there's a lot of things that just keep coming up. The one thing I did want to say is I had heard Bishop T.D. Jakes say on the news last week that it's hard to talk about healing when we're still in surgery.
Right.
Until the cancer's been cut out, it's hard to focus on healing.
Right.
And that just, it just resonated so strongly with me, because it's like, yeah, we're going to be in this for a minute. So what do we want that to look like? Right. But it's hard to not be in a, in a training session and break down when things are still happening. Right.
Still being operated on. Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you, Erin, for inviting me. I know there's just a lot coming up. And so thanks for giving me the opportunity to let it out into the open.
Well, voice whatever you want. This is your platform. If there's more, let us know.
Yeah, this is why well-being, how we choose to lead in the world and doing it from a place of wellness is important, because it's hard to have clarity of thought. There's a lot of cognitive energy, a lot of thinking that needs to go into all of this work. And we also need to give ourselves some time for rest and renewal so we can stay in it actively from a place of wholeness. So
yeah, I think that's such a beautiful point, and we'll just kind of end it on that, because with lots of underlines and heart emojis.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Shamis.
I appreciate it.
Thank you guys all for joining us, that joined us. It's $50. I'm going to count myself in to go into color change. And yeah, I'll post it when I donate and everyone can see. All right.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Erin.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a purposeful day.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.